Hey everyone, in this video we are going to talk about arithmetic properties such as addition property, multiplication property, commutative property, distributive property, associative property, all those properties. So if you have completed your IXL assignment so far, that was again kind of like the foundation of Study Island. This right here is one of the easiest assignments because it is all about kind of like recognizing what you see and understanding that it looks like this property or that property. So in which case you need to know the definitions. You're not gonna like solve equations or anything like that, but you need to understand how these definitions work. And then when you have a question, you're gonna see like, does this look like associative property? Is it like commutative property? So if you know what they are, if you know the definitions, you're not gonna have any trouble with this lesson at all. But if you don't want to like figure out the properties, then you're gonna have hard time. Not because the lesson is tedious, it is because you don't know the definitions. So let's first talk about commutative property. It's kind of like self-explanatory. When you have terms, they commute, their order change without changing the result. So that's what commutative property is called. So addition and multiplication are commutative. Here is why. When you are adding 2 plus 3, they can commute. What does that mean? 2 plus 3 is 5, right? Without changing the answer, you can just commute these two terms. If you change the order, if you can change the order without changing the answer, that is called commutative property. So the properties look kind of like similar, so you literally need to know 100% what definition goes for which term. Or to generalize this statement, you can do a plus b equals b plus a. That's what commutative property is. You can just switch them around without changing the answer. And same thing with multiplication. Like 5 times 4 is the same as 4 times 5. You can use letters instead of the numbers. And this is going to work every single time when you deal with multiplication and addition. It's not going to work for subtraction and division all the time. It could work, it can work for some cases, but not for all of the cases. Here's a counter example about division. 6 over 2. And just commute the terms, switch them around. These are not equal. That one is 1/3, that is 3. Not the same. So, and same thing with the subtraction. You can do 6 minus 1, which is not going to be equal to 1 minus 6. This one is -5. That one is +5. And as you see, they're not equal. That's why there's no commutative property in subtraction and division. You don't want to mix up these terms, by the way. And yeah, they give you different counter examples over there as well. Distributive property, what does that mean? When you have a term outside of a set of parentheses, you can distribute it or multiply it by whatever you have within the parentheses. So let's deal with numbers instead of this expression, or let's just talk about this a little. A times b is right here plus a times c. That's what distributive property is. If you see this relationship, then your answer is distributive property. And it also works the other way. You can put that term or number out to the right side of the parentheses and multiply them, still end up with the same answer. So let's just use numbers. Let's say 2 times 3 plus 1. Okay, this is the same as 2 times 3. And then plus 2 times 1. If you see this, that is called distributive property. If instead of the numbers you have letters, it's still distributive property. Or maybe you don't even see that middle step, and then what you have is this. That's still distributive property, because the operation that we are doing is still the same. The process is the same, without one step less. You don't need to see the middle step to name it. It is distributive property. Moving on to associative property. And again, let's just quickly go over this one. Terms switch around, they commute, but the result stays the same. Distributive property, you just distribute it. Whatever you have outside, you just multiply it, everything that's inside the parentheses. Associative property, you just move the parentheses. Terms should not move at all. If the first term was one thing in one step, it should stay as the first term in another step. Unlike commutative property, where the terms kind of like move around, even though the result is the same. In here, nothing moves around but the parentheses. So, let's say you have a plus b plus c together. Order of operation tells you to do this first, but what you can do, you can just take these parentheses and then just shift them over here. Instead of surrounding b and b plus c right here, you can shift those parentheses a little to the left and then surround these two. As long as you're just adding or multiplying, you're good. For addition and multiplication only, you can do associative property. Okay, so distributive property works for all. Commutative property works for addition and multiplication. Associative property works for addition and multiplication. And let's just use some numbers. 2 plus 3 plus 5. You can write this as, again, the numbers should stay the same. You cannot just move them around because that would be commutative property. And then instead of 3 and 5, you can group these two together. You cannot change the signs as well. And then that's associative property. Again, if one thing moved other than the parentheses, that's not associative property anymore. Okay, let's just check an example then. And here is why associative property doesn't work with subtraction and multiplication. Oh, and division, my bad. So let's just do 5 minus 1 minus 2. This tells me to subtract the parentheses first, right? And do let's just change this to 4 to 6. That gives me 4 and then tells me to do minus 6. The answer would be negative 2, right? And now let's see if it is going to be equal when I have the same numbers, 5, negative 1, and negative 6. But instead of grouping these two together, this time I want to group these two together. Okay? So, do the parentheses first. 1 minus 6. 1 minus 6 is negative 5. It's in the parentheses. And then to the left of it, I have a negative sign and another 5. What's 5 minus negative 5? That's 10. And as you see, negative 10 is not the same as, negative 2 is not the same as 10. This is, as long as you can come up with one example, one single example destroys the whole thing. So we cannot claim, what property was this? Associative property for subtraction. And same thing for division. Now let's check the identity property. So identity, let's talk about addition. When you tell me one number like 5, okay, let's use 5 as an example. What number do you need to add to this so that the answer stays the same? So this product that you put inside the machine that is called addition, the answer is not going to change. What's that number that will work all the time? So for this, it is 0. If you add 0 to any number, the answer is going to be what you had originally at hand. Let's say your number is 5. We just use that example, 7. So if you add 0 to 7, the answer is going to be the same as your original number. So that's what identity is called or defined. For multiplication, what number do you need to multiply 5 to end up with itself. So that's 1. If the identity of multiplication is 1, whereas identity of addition is 0. So that's why you have times 1 in there. When you multiply any number by 1, the answer would be equal to that number that you had originally. That's what identity property is. And the last thing that we need to learn is inverse property. Inverse property is what do you need to do to cancel it out. Let's say we're talking about addition. We have 5, you want to cancel it out by doing addition. What do you need to add? It's -5. Let's say you have 3 and you want to cancel it out. How do you cancel it out? Don't you do -3? If you have 11, don't you do -11 to end up with 0 or to cancel it out? So let's just come up with a general form. Instead of 5, 7, 11, or 3, if we have a, and if we add its negative, then they will cancel each other out, and I will end up with 0 when I use addition, right? Let's say you have 1, you want to add another thing to that 1 so that you can cancel it out. Wouldn't you do the inverse operation? That's where the name comes from. Inverse means opposite, to cancel it out so that you can end up with 0. Or think about multiplication. So 0, so for the multiplication, how do you cancel that multiplication out? Let's say you have 6 and you want to cancel this out by multiplying it. How do you do that? Don't you divide it? What do you divide it by? I would divide it by 1/6 so that the answer is 1. If you have 11, how do you cancel this out by multiplication? By using multiplication, you would do this. You would divide by 11, but this is another form of writing it. So let's just not use a number. Let's use a letter instead of the variable. If I want to cancel this out, I want to divide it by that so that they cancel each other out, and I would end up with 1. So that's called inverse property for multiplication. Now, these are inverse, additive inverse, they're each other's opposite when we think about addition, and these are multiplicative inverse. Okay, now we have one example over here. That looks like that's going to take forever, but it won't because we haven't read the question yet. It says indicate which properties are illustrated in step 1, step 3, and 5. So for study island, this is kind of like the question format that you're going to get. It's not going to be this long all the time. It's usually going to be shorter, but you only need to focus on the part that is asked you to figure out. So let's check step 1. I don't care what's going on in there. I am interested in step 1 only. So let's just check step 1. It has 2 sides. If it has 2 sides, you need to find the difference from left to right. That's how it works. So again, for step 1, we have the left side and we have the right side. You gotta look for what's going on from left to right. You need to find the difference or the change. Okay, -5 stays the same. 12 times 4x, 12. You see that there is a difference in here? And then -6, -16, plus 9, plus is the same, but then there's a difference in here, right? So let's just focus on the differences then. Instead of like circling and crossing out everything, let's just look at the difference. This turned into that right here, and then this turned into that right there. Now let's check the order of the terms, because if we change the order of the numbers or terms, then it's likely going to be commutative property, because that's where the terms commute, where they are switched around. 12 4x, 12 4x, 9 negative 7x, 9 negative 7x. So the order of the terms is the same, but the difference is the parentheses. Instead of surrounding 4 and x, they are surrounding 12 and 4 in here. Instead of surrounding negative 7 and x, they are surrounding 9 and negative 7. This is called associative property. When you just move the parentheses around, that is called associative property. Of multiplication, yeah. Now that's step 1. If you're done with step 1, I'm going to clear this out. Now we are going to check step 3 out. Step 3 has the right side, but it does not have the left side. So the left side of step 3 is kind of like the previous step. So you're going to check these 2 steps out and then look for the differences. It's like this is the right side, and then this became my left side, kind of that way. So look for the differences from the previous step to the next step if it does not have 2 sides. So now I'm going to clear this out. I'm going to focus on the differences. Negative 5 is the same. 48x is the same. I have negatives. They are the same. 16 plus, and it turned into negative 6. This is the difference, right? Now we need to describe what's going on in there. So the first term in here was 16. The second term was this guy over here. And then that term became the first one, and then 16 became the second one. Are they commuting? This is commutative property. So commutative property for the third step. If the terms are switched, that's called commutative property. And step 5 is, you see, I'm not interested in everything else that is going on in the question. I'm just focusing on what my question is. Next, I'll move on to step 5. Step 5 is right here. It's one-sided. It does not have the left side. So my left side is this then. I'm looking for the difference from the left side or the previous side to the next step. So again, I'll just focus on the difference. Let's just clear this out. Negative 5 is the same. 48 is the same. These are gone. Negative 1. Okay, there's a difference in here. These are my differences. What is going on? In the first one, I have a negative 1 outside of this parentheses, right? It's negative 1 times that whole thing right here. And then it is distributed. Negative 1 times negative 63x, which is what I have over here. And then negative 1 times positive 16, which is what I have up here. This is called distributive property, or distribution property. Based on the resources that you're using, they are the same. Either distributive property or this what was it, the other term? I forget. So yeah, distributive property is this one here, because that's what we are doing. And that's it. Yeah. So let me see. Associative, commutative, and distributive. Associative, commutative, and distributive property. Yep. We are done with this question. Let's see what we have next. Okay, scrolling down. Out of 10 pages. Okay. So once you see a video on Study Island's notes, that means the rest is going to be video. So if you need more help with this lesson, I would suggest watching these videos first. There are descriptions below each video that tells you what it is about. Also, over here, it also tells you what it is about from Study Island's perspective. This definition comes from the video itself. It's the title of the video, Identity Property, and it tells you what identity property it is specifically about. It is about multiplicative identity, not additive identity. So If you need extra help, watch those videos first, since they're going to give you more examples. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in another video, guys.